find myself in this situation. I had just broken up with Daniel a few months ago, and I thought I was finally getting my life together. But then came Ethan, Daniel's younger brother. Quiet, reserved, always the good boy, who I'd never thought of as anything more than a sibling. That is, until one night at a mutual friend's party. We'd been talking, catching up, and I thought I saw a flicker of something different in his eyes. And then he said it. "I love you." I froze. Ethan, standing there, his hand nervously fidgeting with the rim of his glass, looked at me like he was waiting for me to slap him or laugh it off. But instead, I just stood there, my heart racing. The last thing I expected was for him to say something like that. After Ethan's confession, everything changed. I tried to pretend it didn't happen, but I couldn't ignore the way he started looking at me, the way he'd linger during conversations, the texts, the calls, even the way he stood a little too close. Every time I was near him, my heart pounded and guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't tell if I was just afraid of what this would mean for my relationship with Daniel, or if I was actually starting to feel something for Ethan. The attraction was undeniable. One night, I broke. We were alone, and the tension was suffocating. Before I could stop myself, I kissed him. I pulled away almost immediately, horrified at myself, but Ethan didn't move. He looked at me, his breath shallow. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. The next morning, everything felt wrong. My head was spinning with guilt, and my heart ached. I knew I had to confront Daniel. When I finally did, his face went pale. I told him everything, that Ethan had confessed his love, that we'd kissed. "I don't want to be the one who ruins things between you and him," I said, my voice shaking. But I couldn't keep this secret. Daniel stood there for a long time, not saying a word. Then finally, he looked at me with a sad, resigned smile. "I've always known," he said softly. "I just didn't want to admit it." The words stung more than I expected. I thought I'd feel relief, but instead, I felt like I'd lost everything. Days went by, and I felt more and more torn. Ethan wasn't giving up, and I couldn't stop thinking about him. But at the same time, I didn't want to lose Daniel. Even though we were no longer together, he had always been a part of my life. I realized something. I was stuck between my past and my future. I didn't want to hurt Daniel further, but I also couldn't ignore the feelings I had for Ethan. One night, I met with him again. He looked at me with those familiar eyes, and before I could say anything, he kissed me again. This time, I didn't pull away, and in that moment, I knew I had to make a choice. In the end, I chose Ethan. It wasn't easy. There were many tears, many apologies, and a lot of time spent thinking. Daniel and I are still working through things, but I can't deny what's blossoming with Ethan. It's not perfect, but nothing ever is. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm making a decision for myself. I'm not sure where this will lead, but I'm willing to find out, even if it means navigating the complexities of family, love, and loyalty. Just when I thought things were starting to settle, life threw another curveball my way. Ethan and I had been seeing each other in secret, cautiously but passionately. It was thrilling, yet suffocating at times. And just when I felt like I was getting the hang of it, Daniel showed up at my door. He was standing there, looking worn out, as though he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his voice shaky. "I know what you've been doing," he said, his words heavy with a mix of anger and desperation. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was to come. "Daniel, I didn't want to hurt you," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "It's not that. It's Ethan. He didn't tell you, did he?" My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" Daniel's expression faltered for a moment, then he looked away. "Ethan, he's been seeing someone else behind your back. I found out a few weeks ago, but I didn't know if I should tell you. I thought you needed time to figure out what you wanted, but now it's all falling apart." I froze, feeling a cold wave of confusion wash over me. Ethan had been so sincere, so devoted. I never imagined he'd betray me like this, especially after everything he had confessed. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living in the dark. I texted Ethan, demanding to meet. When he arrived, he looked different, nervous, on edge, like he knew what was coming. "You have to explain," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "Daniel says you've been seeing someone else. What's going on?" Ethan's eyes flickered with guilt. He didn't deny it. "It's true, but it's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, feeling a lump form in my throat. "How could you do this to me, Ethan? I trusted you." He took a step closer, his hands held out in apology. "It's not what you think. I never meant for it to get this far. But when you and Daniel broke up, I was heartbroken too. I wasn't ready for a relationship, but I couldn't let you go. So I started seeing someone else, trying to keep my mind off of everything. But I swear to you, it was never about not loving you. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and heartbreak. Why hadn't he told me sooner? Why did he have to lie to me? His sincerity now felt like a betrayal. I was left with a decision that felt impossible. I had spent so long trying to balance my emotions for Ethan and my loyalty to Daniel, and now I was being faced with the truth. Ethan's confession, the one thing I had wanted so desperately to hear from him, was a lie, buried in secrecy and shame. I could feel my trust unraveling, but there was a part of me that still wanted to believe in him. But then, something unexpected happened. As I sat there, processing everything, Daniel reached out to me. Not in anger, not to blame me, but to offer a way forward for both of us. He had already begun seeing someone else. He'd been healing too in his own way. "You deserve to be happy, and so do I," Daniel said softly over the phone. "I don't want to be the person who holds you back." The weight of his words crushed me. I had spent so much time clinging to the idea of us, but the reality was different now. He was moving on, and so was I. Weeks passed, and though I was still reeling from the emotional whirlwind, I began to rebuild. Ethan reached out repeatedly, but I couldn't bring myself to trust him again. He had lied, not once, but twice, and I realized that I couldn't keep living in a relationship that was built on deceit. As for Daniel, I did see him again. We had long conversations about what went wrong, about what we both needed from life, and though we couldn't go back to what we had, we both found a new understanding. In the end, I was ready to start fresh, without Ethan, without Daniel. Maybe one day I'd find love again. But for now, I was focusing on me, and that felt like the right thing to do. Months passed, and I had finally started to feel like I was in a better place. I had taken the time to heal, rediscovered passions I had forgotten about, and was slowly rebuilding my life. I had even started dating again, casually. Life was beginning to feel normal again, almost like the whole Ethan Daniel mess had been a distant memory. Until one night, out of nowhere, I got a message. It was from Ethan. He said he needed to talk. My heart stopped for a second. I'd ignored his attempts to reach me for months, but something in his message felt different. It was almost desperate, tinged with urgency. I agreed to meet him, but I told myself I was prepared for whatever he was going to say. When I arrived at the cafe where we were supposed to meet, I was surprised to find not just Ethan, but Daniel sitting at the table too. Both of them looked like they hadn't slept in days. "I know this isn't easy," Daniel said, his voice hoarse, "but we have to tell you something." He looked at Ethan, who nodded, his face pale. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking with unease. Ethan cleared his throat and began, "I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but there's something you don't know, something that has been kept from you, by both of us." Daniel leaned forward, his face pale. "When Ethan and I were younger, we were really close, but there's something that happened, something we never talked about. We both knew it would change everything if you found out, so we kept it quiet, even from you." I blinked, trying to make sense of their words. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. Ethan took a deep breath. "Years ago, before you and Daniel ever met, Daniel and I, we were in a relationship." The words hit me like a slap. I could barely process what they were saying. Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were together, secretly. It was something we had to hide, because of the family, because of everything. We were both confused. We both knew it wasn't meant to last. But the truth is, we never completely let it go. And when you came into the picture, things got even more complicated." I could barely breathe. My mind raced, trying to understand how everything I thought I knew about both of them was built on a lie. I had been so focused on the betrayal between Ethan and me, but this was so much worse. Ethan continued, his voice cracking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I kept my feelings for you hidden, things would work out. But when we kissed, I realized I was still holding on to something I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this." Daniel's voice was quieter, but just as pained. "When I found out you were seeing him, it broke me, and I wasn't sure if I was upset because you were with my brother, or because I'd never truly let go of what we had. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about my relationships with both of them, had been shattered in an instant. They weren't just brothers. They were connected in a way I never could have imagined. And it was that connection that had kept them both from fully moving on from me, even though they had never been truly honest with me. You both lied to me, I said quietly, the hurt seeping through my words. You both kept things from me, and now I'm the one paying for it. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I never meant for this to happen. I swear I didn't. But the truth was, No apology could fix what had been done. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I can't do this. Not anymore. As I walked out of the cafe, my mind raced. I had loved both of them, but now I realized I had been nothing more than a pawn in their tangled history. And the worst part, I still had feelings for both of them. The bond we shared had been built on so many lies, but I still felt the pull. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I realized something else. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about finding my own truth, away from them, away from the past. I needed to let go completely, not just of them, but of the illusions I'd built around them. Maybe one day I could forgive them. But for now, I was walking away. For good. Weeks passed, and I didn't hear from either Ethan or Daniel again. I focused on my work, my life, finding joy in the small moments I had previously overlooked. I surrounded myself with friends, took trips on my own, and slowly began to realize that I was whole without them. And then one evening, while sitting alone at a cafe, I saw a man across the room who looked so much like Ethan. My heart stopped for a moment, but then I shook my head. It wasn't him. I wasn't running away from love anymore. I was letting go. The world was bigger than my past with them. And finally, I was free. That's all for today. Please leave any comment under the video. It will help our channel grow. If you don't subscribe now, we probably won't see you again. But if you do subscribe, you won't miss new interesting Reddit videos. See you.